Hi, everybody, and welcome to Ivy League Analytical English. I'm Karen.
And I'm Wesley.
Let's get started on today's translation exercise.
好，我们看到他讲到说，一位联合国的食物专家说，我们将饮食从肉类换成昆虫，就可以减少温室气体。那一位联合国的食物专家说，那这个地方中文当然很清楚，已经跟你讲一位了，但有的时候这个中文这个一位可能不讲啊。如果他只讲说联合国的食物专家说，这个时候你就要去考虑，你这个食物专家要用单数还是复数啊？因为 expert 专家这个字是可数名词啊。那通常来讲，像这种时候，他就算不讲一位的话，我想我的直觉是我也会觉得那是一个人讲的，不是说一群专家一起讲，那比较奇怪。
This is a really, really important point because when you are speaking English or writing English or translation, you are often 手忙脚乱. You're so busy because you have to think of the words, the grammar, everything else. There are a lot of things that you tend to forget. And one of the biggest ones after tense in verbs is number. You don't even think about the number. You just write something down because you remember the words. The UN food experts say, 可能就是这样子. Remember, you must decide, number one, the time. You have to figure out the right form of the verb. Number two, you must figure out what the number is of the nouns in the sentence. You have to know that. Without knowing that, you cannot write a correct English sentence. Or if you do, it's purely accident.
好，所以这个刚刚 Ken 老师讲这个，我们也一直提醒各位，就是其实在中文翻译成英文的时候，有两样东西要特别注意，就是时态跟动词的单复数，还有冠词啦。因为这三个东西呢，在中文里面，冠词中文里面几乎是没有的啊。当然有的时候某些情况是有，但是最重要就像时态跟名词的单复数，当我们在读中文的时候，其实我们不会那么在意，一定要去分出来是一个还是两个，然后时间是什么时候。可是你翻成英文的时候，你就要特别注意，你一定要想办法确定这个是时间是什么时候，然后呢，这个名词是单数还是复数。
Pay attention, rehearse it in your mind. Always remember you have to do something with it.
好，那我们回来看看这个题目哈。所以一位联合国的食物专家说，那我可以把联合国当做一个形容词哈 ，UN 当做一个形容词哈，所以我可以说 a UN food expert 一个食物专家。
Now, why don't we say an UN food expert? A U is a vowel, isn't it?
要小心这个。A 跟 AN 的使用是看发音，而不是看字母啊。那 U 看起来是个母音字母，可是它的发音是 U， 是子音，所以这个地方是 A 然后 UN 你不要以为看到 U 就觉得一定是 AN， 不是。
KK 音标要写 JU，J 其实就是一个子音 ，so we say a UN food expert, a university, etc.
Good point. 我从来没想到过这个 U 的 KK 音标前面有一个 J 所以其实就表示这是个子音了啊。好，所以呢，他说我们就用 said 过去式 said that。那我们将饮食从肉类换成这个昆虫，这其实可以看成这个条件。那结果就是我们可以减少温室气体所以我可以先讲减少温室气体。那减少的英文就是 reduce， 那温室气体就是greenhouse gases 那注意那 gases 通常会加 s 因为温室气体你可以想它不止一种气体了然后呢，后面再把这个条件讲出来 ，if 我们怎么样将饮食从肉类换成昆虫这个换这个字呢，其实你可以用switch 用 change 都可以，但是你可以试着用另外一个字用 replace 是取代，所以你把饮食从肉类换成昆虫，换句话说就是你用昆虫去取代肉类，所以你可以说 if we replace 取代，然后呢 meat with insects。那这个地方要注意 meat 通常不加 s 的，但是 insect 可以加 s， 它是可数的，所以 replace meat with insects。然后呢，饮食那这个地方饮食我们怎么表达呢？我们可以说我们吃什么东西 in our diet 所以 in our diet 就表示这是我们饮食的里面所含的这些食物所以这后面这个条件我可以说 if we replace meat with insects in our diet， 这样就好了。所以我整句我再念一次。A UN food expert said that we could reduce greenhouse gases if we replace meat with insects in our diet.
That's really good. I want to hear it one more time, could I?
Okay. 好，那再来一次。A UN food expert said that we could reduce greenhouse gases if we replace meat with insects in our diet.
All right, I'm going to read my translation now, but before I do, I want you to turn on your ears and listen to the tenses that I chose because they're almost the opposite from Wesley's. However, both are correct. Both have slightly different meanings. I'll read mine, we'll explain it, and then we'll compare the two and see what the difference is. My translation is a UN food expert says that if we switched from eating meat to eating insects, we could reduce greenhouse gases. I will read you another version, and I'm going to reread my first one because all of them do something slightly different with the verbs. All right, my second version is, a UN food expert says that switching from eating meat to eating insects could reduce greenhouse gases. Now, this one's slightly different. Here I am using a 动名词. I'm using a gerund. Now, it's not quite as good in my opinion. It's perfectly grammatical. But one reason I don't like it is, number one, we've got a bunch of ing verbs already. Switching, eating meat, eating insects. We have 3 of them if we use switching. And the other reason is it's not so clear who is doing the switching because we don't have a person here. We didn't say we or you or I or whatever. But I'm going to read both versions again, and then we'll talk about each one. A UN food expert says that switching from eating meat to eating insects could reduce greenhouse gases. My first version, we'll work on that first. A UN food expert says that, 注意哦, if we switched, 过去式, from eating meat to eating insects, we could reduce greenhouse gases. I will mention first that the biggest difference between Wesley's and mine is in the part with switched. Mine is more of a 假设. I'm saying if we did that, 那如果这么做，当然不会这么做，这太奇怪，可能性真的很低。If we switched, 如果要那样做的话，会有这样的一个结果。Wesley is saying that maybe we should do this. It's more like a 提议. It's a proposal. If we switch, 可能就在眼前，我们在考虑要不要那么做。So there is a huge difference in the message you're giving your listener, even though to a Chinese, you probably will not even notice the difference.
You're right. 好，所以这个地方呢，我们其实可以注意到几个很有趣的时态的问题哈。第一个就是我用的是。其实我的主动词用的是 said， 是过去式啊。那 Karen 老师用的是 says 啊，是现在式。那差别在哪里？我用 said 的话，感觉起来这件事情已经过去了。
有那么一次，他这样子发表他的那个想法。
对，他说过这么一次。那言下之意就是，也许现在已经不一样，或者是现在怎么样，我不知道了。但是 says 的话呢，就感觉那是他的一个意见，他一直是这样觉得，他现在也感觉是这样。
That's one reason. The other reason is we're treating it sort of like a 新闻标题, and we often use the present tense in headlines or in titles of stories. He says that, 就好像新闻标题一样，通常用现在式。
好，所以这第一个差别。那第二个差别就是我的条件，我是讲 if we replace meat with insects， 我是 replace， 我是用现在式。那这个时候呢，就是一个简单的条件句的，那感觉起来好像是个 proposal 一样，我的提议的，我们可以这样做。表示还是有可能会这么做的，但是 Karen 老师用的是假设语气，他就说if we switched 有一个 ed from 什么什么from eating meat to eating insects， 然后呢 we could， 这 could 也是一样，这是假设语气的关系。好，所以这个时态也是非常有趣的一个。那第三个就是 Karen 老师他另外一种版本，他是说 switching from eating meat to eating insects could reduce greenhouse gases。 那这个地方呢，它是用 switching 这个片语switching from eating meat to eating insects， 这整个当主词所以他接下来就直接讲说 could reduce 什么什么什么。那这个版本刚刚 Karen 老师讲比较稍微不是那么理想，因为有太多的 ing， 这第一个理由switching from eating meat to eating insects， 一直那第二个就是 switching from eating， 你这样子的话是谁做这个 switching 不清楚，所以根据这些理由来讲呢，这个是比较不是那么理想的版本，但是文法也是没有问题的。
对，也是可以考虑。And the advantage of it is if you're having trouble with tenses, you don't have to think about them so much because this is what we call a non-finite verb. 之前的节目中我们提过什么叫 non-finite verb。
就是非限定动词。
对，没有限定它到底是谁在做。So let's do all three. Pay attention to the differences. As you listen to them, think in your mind what this one is saying, the message that each one gives. Each one is slightly different. So the one with switching is the most general. A UN food expert says that switching from eating meat to eating insects could reduce greenhouse gases. 后面的 we 也不用了。The second one I have is a UN food expert says, 又是现在式, that if we switched from eating meat to eating insects, we could reduce greenhouse gases. 你用这种 finite verb 的话，限定动词后面你还是要程序下去，你还是要加一个主词在那边，一个代名词在那里。And the third version, Wesley's?
好 ，A UN food expert said that we could reduce greenhouse gases if we replace meat with insects in our diet.
All three are different. Learn all three of them. You'll know a lot about English verbs. Let's look at the version now in our magazine. A food expert at the United Nations says that switching our diets from meat to insects can cut down on greenhouse gases. Now, not only do they use the 动名词 here, switching, they also use can 而不用 could. 这样子的话根本就不是一个假设语气。It's just saying if we do this, it will happen. 不是那种好像不太有可能的这种假想，而是好像是真的可能会做。Doing this will do that. 用现在时。
好，所以这个地方我们看到它这个杂志上面的翻译呢，其实把这个联合国当做一个地点啊，或者是他工作的地方，所以他说 a food expert， 然后再告诉你说 at the United Nations， 啊，这个是感觉起来是用一个地方副词来做一个修饰语。那后面呢，他也是用 switching， 但是他的说法是 switching our diets from meat to insects。那这样的话呢，他就可以避免掉那个 ing 太多的问题，所以他这里用这个 switching 的话呢，就可以避免掉我们刚刚讲的第一种可能，就是如果你用 ing 的话，会产生太多 ing。Okay,
that takes care of number one. Let's go on to number two.
好，那第二个题目呢是我不排斥资源回收或者是使用较少的化石燃料，但是我绝对不会吃昆虫来改善环境。那我不排斥这个地方排斥你当然可以说 opposed to 但是 opposed to 是反对，那个很强那在这里我不排斥的意思就是如果要吃我也没关系啦，所以其实它表达出来是这种 I don't mind 的这种感觉，
不会主动去找这个东西吃，
对，
可是要吃也好
也可以，对所以我就用 I don't mind 来翻译这个我不排斥所以 I don't mind， 然后呢后面有两个动作，一个是资源回收，一个是使用较少的这个化石燃料。那资源回收当然你可以说 recycling 所以我们可以说 I don't mind recycling 但是光一个 recycling 我觉得好像有点好像感觉意犹未尽那种感觉，所以呢其实我后面可以加一个 I don't mind recycling waste 就是废物废弃物。
And there's another problem. If you don't put an object in there, then recycling may go with the rest of the sentence as well.
那另外一个问题就是 recycling 这个字或者 recycle 这个字其实是个及物动词，所以我如果这里不加受词 waste 的话，那可能它会让读者以为我 recycling 后面那些字变成它的受词了。
后面就是什么词呢？
后面就是怎么样？后面其实就是使用较少的化石燃料所以我们这个同时其实后面又出现另外一个动词出来，所以这 recycling 放在这里，你有可能会变成说 recycling 跟另外一个动词 reducing 共用一个受词，就是 fossil fuels。
对 recycling reducing 就觉得放在一起会愣一下，所以比较不清楚，所以还是让你清楚一点。
对，会跳针这个其实你会跳针的表示是写的不清楚了所以我这后面加了一个 waste， 然后使用这个较少的这个 fossil fuels， 那我可以说 reduce my use of fossil fuels。 那这样的话整个句子我前面半段放在一起就变成 I don't mind recycling waste or reducing my use of fossil fuels。 好，那后面呢？但是我绝对不会这样子。那绝对不会，其实英文很简单的说法就是 I will never， 就是我绝对不会。所以 I will never eat insects， 我绝对不会吃昆虫。来干嘛呢？改善环境。好，那这个地方改善环境，你说 improve the environment， 其实有一点，因为你不吃其实是比较消极的，所以你光做这么消极，你不见得能够 improve。所以我这里我就用 help the environment。所以呢，就是。I will never eat insects to help the environment， 就是我绝对不会吃昆虫来做环保所以做环保其实有时候英文可以讲 to help the environment。 好，所以我整句话我再念一次 I don't mind recycling waste or reducing my use of fossil fuels, but I will never eat insects to help the environment.
Okay, very good. I have 3 versions this time again. I have no trouble with recycling resources or reducing my consumption of fossil fuels.But eating insects to improve the environment is out of the question. That's the first one. The second one, I have no problem. Trouble 跟 problem 不要加 s 都可以用在这个地方。I have no problem with 我这方面没有问题啊。I have no problem with recycling resources or reducing my consumption of fossil fuels, but eating insects to improve the environment is just going too far. 太过头了。And the third version, I have no trouble with recycling resources or reducing my consumption of fossil fuels. This part is the same. But I'll be darned if I ever start eating insects to help the environment. 这个原来是有点粗话，因为 darned 其实是代替 damn。damn 是很重的话，就是平常你不要用，就是因为它是宗教诅咒，我们还更不喜欢这种东西。可是我们可以用 darn 来代替啊，比较没有那么严重。We might say this when we have strong feelings about something. So I have no trouble with recycling resources or reducing my consumption of fossil fuels, but I'll be darned if I ever start eating insects to help the environment.
好，所以 Karen 老师的翻译呢，首先大家可以注意到，他不排斥，他有两种说法，一个是 I have no problem with 什么，或者是 I have no trouble with 什么，好，然后呢 recycling resources or reducing my consumption of fossil fuels， 然后呢后面他前面两种方法是用一个动名词当主词 eating insects to improve the environment， 这件事情是怎么样 is 不可能，绝对不会，有两种说法，一个是 out of the question， 一个是 just going too far， 太过分了啊，或者是他第二部分就是可以说 but I'll be darned， 啊，就是我就该死，我如果真的会做这件事我就该死，意思就是我绝对不会这么做。好，所以呢我英文可以讲说 if I ever start eating insects to help the environment。Right,
and I read it in this way, but I'll be darned if I ever start eating insects to help the environment.
语气很重要。
Right. Let's look at the translation in our magazine. I don't mind recycling or using fewer fossil fuels, but eating insects is the last thing I would do to help the environment. Now, this is a tongue twister. Using fewer fossil fuels. Take it slowly or you will probably make a mistake. It's strange that I didn't. But eating insects is the last thing I would do to help the environment.
好，如果你说什么东西 is the last thing I would do， 就表示我绝对不会这么做。好，那将是我做的最后一件事情。好，换句话说，我绝对不要那么做。那还有一个问题就是 fewer fossil fuels 有3个 F， 好，那这个地方呢，这看个人的感觉，有的人可能不觉得说连续3个 F 太不好念了，也许会想个别的办法。
哦，你念得好顺哦。
没有 ，because I heard it so many times.
And the last thing I would ever do, we use that a lot. For example, I wouldn't marry you if you were the last man on earth.
啊，就算世界上这是你一个男人的，我也不会嫁给你的。
Okay, that is it for today. Please tune in next time. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.